Rev up your engine! Today, by popular demand, I'm going to talk about 5 noises that cars can make, how to find out what that noise is, and how to fix it. We hear noises. Some noises tend to drive us crazy. So here's 5 of them that often drive people nuts. Now the first one is when you turn your car's key to start it, and all you get is a click, click, click. Now that's a very common problem that has to do with the starter. When you turn the key to start it, it activates the solenoid. The solenoid then pushes the Bendix gear here out, and when it goes out here, then it meshes with the flywheel on the engine and spins the engine by the electric motor here, turning and spinning it. Now when all you hear is a click when you turn the starter and the car doesn't spin around, that means you got a problem. It can be more than one problem. That's why you got to figure it out. If you have a battery that is low on electricity, it has enough electricity to make the little solenoid go click in, but not enough electricity to make the motor spin the engine. First thing you do is try to jump start the car. If it jump starts, great. Then you just know you need another battery. If there's any problem with the wiring, you can do the same thing. Sometimes going click when you turn it can be a loose battery terminal. Grab those terminals. If you can wiggle them around, take them off, clean them, and put them on tight, a lot of times you'll find it'll start right up again. Now, if none of those work, then it's often a worn out starter. The motor won't spin because it's worn out inside. Now, the next common noise that occurs, you turn your steering wheel while you're taking corners, and in the front you hear clickety clickety click, clickety clickety click, and then when you go straight, the noise stops. Well, that clicking noise when you turn and drive is often a bad CV joint. You can see here's a broken one. You see the rubber's ripped, the grease leaks out, and then this clacks because it's not lubricated anymore. Now that's very easy to check. You just jack up the car just enough so you can look under, then turn the wheel all the way so the tire's as far as it goes, and just go under here and look. There's the CV joint right here. You can see this one's not ripped. It's completely all together. When you see it ripped like this and the grease is all leaked out, you know it's time for a new one. And here's a tip. Now years ago, we mechanics used to take the drive shaft apart, buy a new CV joint and boot kit, put it back together and put it on. But these days, there's very good aftermarket brand new axle assemblies. So you just buy the whole thing, and then instead of having to take it all apart and mess with all the bearings, you just take the old shaft out and put the new shaft in. I got plenty of videos showing you how to do it. Because if you go to buy the dealer OEM joint alone, that'll often cost 3 times what the whole axle assembly is. Most places, you can get an axle anywhere from $59 to $69, brand new, and they work perfectly fine. So there's no sense attempting to fix the old one. Now the next noise you'll often hear is a squealing noise either when you start the car, or if you accelerate, or if it's raining outside and it starts squealing, and that's often a bad fan belt. Yeah, it shows my age. They used to call them fan belts because they drove the fan that cooled the radiator. If you have a loose or worn fan belt, it'll squeal when you start it up first thing before it warms up. It'll often squeal when you accelerate because that's straining the engine and then the belt will squeal, or it'll often squeal, hit rainwater. Rainwater hits it and then the water makes it slip a little and it'll squeal. So here's how you can tell what it is. You can use some of this spray silicone lube, and with the engine turned off, go to the fan belt area if you suspect that's where the noise is coming from. Side of the fan belt, like here, you spray it all over, up and down on the inside. Yeah, it was messy there, but you just spray the inside and spray the inside of the pulleys that it drives over. Now, spraying the silicone on isn't going to fix anything. If it's squeaking and you spray it on and you hear the squeak stops, the belt is worn or it's loose, and from my experience today, you best just to replace them. Because sure, my old 94 Celica, the belts are manually adjustable. As they wear, you have to loosen bolts and then tighten them by moving the alternator, then tighten them up, and as they wear, you got to retension them every once in a while. But most modern cars have automatic tensioners, and most only have one drive belt, big giant thing. So it's a good idea, whenever it starts making noise, just change the thing out, especially if it's 4 or 5 years old. Who wants to be stranded because of a stupid fan belt? And here's another tip. Don't go out and buy the cheapest fan belt you can possibly get unless you're going to sell the car right away, because the quality fan belts last longer. I found in the past, I used to go and buy them at the dealer. they lasted the absolute longest. But now there's companies like Goodyear and many other ones out there that make really good belts that last just as long, if not even longer than the original equipment. But don't go buy the cheapest one. If you go to an auto parts store and they say, well, we got this one belt for $19.95 and the other one's $29.95, buy the $29.95 one if it's got a quality brand name on it, because you don't want it to wear out. These things can last a long time. I've seen them last 80, 90,000 miles. So when you do change it, put a good one in so you don't have a problem. Now the next common noise that you'll often hear, you're driving down the road and every time you turn the steering wheel, you hear nying. That's inside the power steering system. It's making a noise because when you turn the wheel, the power steering pump has to send all its pressure to boost the opposite side that you're turning to push it harder to give you the power assist. Now sometimes it's as simple as you're just low on fluid. If it's not up to the top mark, add some fluid. If you're losing fluid, there's either a leak somewhere or you just haven't checked it in a really long time. Normally there's a leak, but years ago my brother-in-law had a Toyota van and he took it to the dealer and they said, you need a power steering pump. We don't have it, but we'll special order it. And it was 500 something bucks. He hadn't checked the fluid in that thing for 5-6 years. They filled it up so it was full when he drove away while he was waiting for them to get the pump. Well, they screwed up somewhere and he never got a call and the pump never showed up. But 2 years later, it was still full and not making any noise. Over time, you can lose a tiny bit of fluid over years and years and years and years. So if you're low on fluid and you fill it up, a year later it's still pretty full, I wouldn't even worry about that. But since they have so much pressure, a lot of these power steering pumps put out like 1,500 pounds per square inch pressure. It's a lot of pressure. Normally the first thing to go is the high pressure hose. Even my old Celicos had the high pressure hose replaced. It holds the highest pressure. The rubber eventually falls apart, starts seeping through the cell walls, or where it's crimped to the metal ends that bolt on, it leaks there. And that's generally really easy to figure out. Wipe it with a rag, and if it's a big leak, have somebody turn the wheel while you look at it and you see it squirting out, you know that it needs a new high side power steering hose. And of course, the pumps themselves can leak. You'd look at the front where the pulley is. That's the front main seal. And they go bad, they'll be leaking out of the front. And the worst case scenario is if you have a leaking power steering rack. When they leak, the fluid will drip. At the end of the rack where the boot is, they've got a big rubber boot. And if fluid's coming out of there, that means that the rack is going to have to be replaced. Because that big rubber boot that's on the end of the power steering rack on the left end and the right end, that's just a dust cover to keep dirt from getting inside. The actual seal is inside the rack itself. So if there's fluid leaking out around that outside big rubber baffle that you see, it's too late. That's not meant to seal fluid pressure. That's just to keep dirt from getting inside and wearing the seal. Then you'd have to get a new rack, and they're very, very expensive. And in probably the rarest of cases, older Honda Accords. I've replaced power steering pumps on many of them. They made the as you turn in the car, but they had no leaks, they weren't losing any fluid, and it was just that the pumps wore out and made that noise. Honda's just over the ages, had problems with their pumps wearing out prematurely, then they make a lot of noise when you turn. And here's a warning about power steering pumps. If you are planning on replacing your power steering pump, please use a brand new one. Don't use a rebuild one. The rebuilt ones are often terrible garbage. I used to try them for customers. Half the time they either wouldn't work, they'd bind, even worse than the previous one did, or they made a lot of noise. And I've had them where I took them back to places and say, hey, this pump's too noisy. And they'll say, look, we guarantee that it works and that it doesn't leak, but we don't guarantee that it doesn't make noise. Or if you want to gamble with a better gamble than a rebuild, go to a salvage yard because, hey, they generally last a really long time, and a lot of times you can pick up a used one for 50 bucks and it'll work perfectly fine. Now the last thing I'm going to talk about is noises of your car. Your car's running, you hear a ticking sound. And it doesn't matter if the car is running, driving, moving, as long as the engine's running, you hear a ticking sound. Well, you want to pray that that ticking sound is something like a worn fuel injector. So if you use a giant screwdriver like this or any metal, when the car's running, all you have to do is put it against your ear and check the fuel injectors one at a time with your ear. Put it on the base of the fuel injector and listen. You hear that ticking loud when you get on one of them, you know it's the fuel injector that's clicking. And of course, to double check that when it is running, if you suspect, say, the number 3 injector is making a noise, turn the car off, unplug that injector and start it up. It'll run poorly, but if you hear the ticking goes away, you know it's the fuel injector. Now you want to pray it's that, because if it isn't, and when you put your sounding unit on the actual engine, on the head itself or the block, and you hear the ticking then, odds are you got a serious internal engine problem like a worn valve, bad hydraulic lifter, or you got the rod starting to knock because the bearings are wearing out. That you don't want. But of course, the fan belt or any of the accessories that it drives, sometimes they can tick if bearings go bad. Before you condemn your engine, remove all the fan belts, then start it up. And pray that the noise goes away. Because then if the ticking goes away, you know it's something that the fan belt drives. Bad alternator bearing, bad water pump bearing, bad idler bearing, something besides the engine. You do not want to hear ticking noise coming from your engine. If you do, then you're going to have a really bad day. So now you know 5 of the most common noises your car can make and what you can do about it to fix it so they don't drive you nuts anymore. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.